we build healthy relationships in development. And we've got three very different spaces here. Got Jack representing, I guess, government, public sector. We've got the NGO sector, and we've got private sector represented here. In effect, how would we go about building relationships between, and I'm going to start with you, Samantha, because Sam, you've obviously worked with tech, and how would you go about using technology to connect and build healthy relationships, knowing that the introduction, as we heard earlier today from Takalani, who shared about the South African workers in farming, they started a digital transformation journey with them in order to create that healthy relationship. How do you do that in Phambano? And you mentioned thousands of NGOs that you work with as well.
Okay, so how do we do it is very different to how I see our customers doing it. And what I can tell you from a non-profit point of view, in the last 12 months since I was last here, we've seen a rapid increase in cloud-based adoption. So things like your Office 365, your Google G Suite, a lot of non-profits are starting to take their old second-hand donated laptops from people that doesn't work, and they're starting to port a lot of their internal business systems onto their mobile device. What that has done is it's shown the government sector as well as the public sector and corporates alike that non-profits are now becoming more transparent. It's allowing them to enhance their day-to-day duties because the cloud has given them this vehicle to work smarter, to work faster, and to, in a sense, be open and transparent with everybody. The problem with that, because those of you that don't know me, you'll get to know by the time I'm done, I will always give you a solution and a problem. The problem with that is that our data costs and Wi-Fi costs have not decreased. So you are seeing a split in the market whereby some of the larger NGOs have adopted quicker. They're adopting to technology, they're bringing on the digital skills, and they're doing perfectly well. But the smaller NGOs don't have enough time to catch up because we don't have better data prices. We don't have free Wi-Fi. No one seems to agree with me in the room here. Usually I get a yes, that's right, but that's what I found.
I mean, the data issue is a huge issue. And again, we won't use data to destroy relationships.
No, not at all.
Just right now.
Yeah.
So you're saying maybe later you might.
Yeah, maybe later. Let's get to know each other better. So, Jack, you obviously get a lot of stick in terms of being in government, and that's natural. The public sector is up for criticism.
Yes.
How do you go about personally building relationships when you know that there's a perception of government in the way that it is?
You've got to be increasingly vigilant for what I call the zone of opportunity, which sounds horribly jargony, but let's unpack that. The truth is, institutions operate according to incentives and regulatory barriers, if you see them at one level, as systems. And I think it is useful to think of government as a system, even if it's often a broken one. And in the context of how corporates and non-profits interact with government, often you'll tend to have one of three kinds of problems in my experience. Number one, expectations are misaligned. So non-profits might expect that government's role is to cover their core operations. Government's expectation might be that non-profits should only be applying for funding or for costs that are specifically cost recovery, whereas their operations at core are meant to be sustainable some other way. So I used to do NGO funding in one of my previous roles, and I definitely saw that misalignment a lot. The second kind of misalignment, often after expectations, is misalignment of incentives. So increasingly, the public sector at its best, and the public sector is a wide spectrum, from hopelessly captured, corrupt, and useless, all the way to surprisingly innovative and refreshing and capable, with lots in between. And I think the incentive increasingly is going to be, for the public sector at its best, to be impact, demand, and outcome driven. And incentives in various government program systems, corporate relationships will often focus on process. because process is easier to measure. Process is easier to understand. Everyone can compare process, whereas outcome has all these different bits and pieces. And no one feels as if they can fully control the outcome and wants to be fully responsible for it. But more and more, government needs to lead by saying, these are the impacts that we are going for, and partnerships are more and more going to have to be about how you co-invest to develop those impacts. The third kind of misalignment is in what I would say is awareness of each other's processes, abilities, requirements, etc. So a lot of NGOs have a grotesque version of government in their head that unfortunately some government officials have no problem bringing to life. And that grotesque version of it is that everything is 15 different forms to fill out and 20 different offices to visit, and don't even bother calling after 3 p.m. and you'll only get your answers to your emails after 6 months, by which time everything you're talking about has disappeared already. There are government officials who inhabit that, but all of our sectors have our grotesque stereotype demons somewhere. But at the same time, the government will then have a equally grotesque version of the NGO, which is like, or the corporate partner, which is the corporate partner's just after favors, they're just after concessions, they're after business from government, they're not really about development or transformation. And with the NGO, these people, they're so entitled, they don't understand what they need to do, they're not developed enough in what they're doing. And one of the things where everyone misses each other is awareness of actually how the internal mechanics of government, nonprofits, and corporates work. And the way I tend to this third one is where I find I tend to do the most unblocking. Because if you understand how to demystify systems for the other people, once people understand, okay, wait a second, I don't get to government funding by having high-powered numbers on my cell phone and meeting them at certain, night spots after hours. I'm looking at you, Vodacom.
We love Vodacom, by the way. We do love Vodacom.
That was a joke. Next thing, legal counsel from Vodacom will be like, no, we note the government partner believes that we are corrupt. Anyway, so the bottom line is you've got to demystify processes. The NGOs need to understand that government cannot simply say yes based on an idea being a good idea. We're a much more regulated beast. We're a creature of laws. And that regulation can be handled innovatively or can be handled bureaucratically. And there's definitely a fair case to be made that government has to get much better at handling it developmentally, but at the same time, a lot of partners seem to think that government operates the way a corporate does, where you can walk into a room, if the decision makers are present and they like the idea, you call the lawyers in, you sign a contract, you go. Anyone who thinks that's the way government works really has spent zero time in the public sector, because there's always layers and layers, and many of the layers are designed to prevent bad things, to stop nuclear deals and such. And so my summary of it, I always say to people, understand this. Bureaucracies are excellent shock absorbers and brake pads. They are lousy accelerators. So if you need to, building healthy relationships often is about finding vehicles where you can co-innovate that aren't the usual service provider relationship and may not be the usual funding relationship. Often what you've got to do is you've got to tear apart, start with the problem you're trying to solve. Don't pay a consultant to tell you that. They'll overcharge you for what is effectively common sense. But you start with the problem you're trying to solve. Don't write 15 documents about it, summarize it, crisp it up, work out what you're all trying to do. Make sure that you all understand what you are all trying to do. The amount of time I spend demystifying that would shock and nauseate you. Number two, work out what the resource pathway to do that is. Is it stipends for youth beneficiaries? Is it funding for computers and data? Is it facilities requirements that can't be met up front? Thirdly, does this have to be funded directly from the state? Can it be loan financed through a capital instrument? Is there something that allows this to become commercially sustainable at step 3 or 4 that you can sell to a financier that says they can finance step 1 and 2? If you can build that kind of understanding, I feel you get a lot further. But for as long as you walk into the room and you've all got the grotesque stereotype of each other in your head and no one wants to move, you're in trouble. And then what people do is they say, this uppity one, I'll get past him. I'll go to this politician, or I'll go to that one, or I know the premier personally and I'm going to see him at this Shizinyama and I'll tell him. And they wind up straight back at me, because I operate under a mandate from the Premier and the DG, and for as long as I'm moving within the bounds of the law and I'm operating as innovatively and creatively as I can within that context, no one is ever going to get me into a situation where I'm making an unethical decision. And that, I suppose, is also part of the health of it. Don't expect each other to be unethical just because it's easier. Don't ask for a back door because it's less trouble and faster, but you know that it makes the system inherently less fair. And those are the kind of things I think that are part of the unhealthy and sometimes abusive relationships corporates, NGOs, and government have with each other.
Sure, thank you. I really just felt the jacket that you got to.
Aspersions of Vodacom. It's actually specifically on Rudi. It's fine.
It was. No, but Rudi, I think let's delve into Vodacom's version, and I think we have heard from Takalani today and from yourself about that. I think let's just get a little bit more personal. How do you approach building partnerships? How do you enforce that from within the organization itself, especially when talking about external stakeholders or other role players? How do you bring your executive experience and just share with us some healthy relationship building expertise?
Let me start with data.
Oh boy, we didn't go there.
You're not allowed to blame ICASA as point one, just in case you were going.
I will not blame ICASA. I will just say what good things we're doing when it comes to education. There's free content on a portal for everybody that owns a Vodacom cell phone. And we've extended that to universities. Our strategy is to also go into the rural areas and into the areas where they were working on 2G and 3G, to start working on 4G and preparing for 5G. And then bring in low-cost cell phones, which are smartphones, to be able to use that. We have adopted a 10 rands minimum to say when somebody has gone out of a data bundle by 10 rands, needs to be notified. But in terms of the ICASA rule, when you've opted in, your data will just cut off. And unless you've opted out, then it means you then inform you that your data is now gone on to 10 rands, and do you need to continue or do we need to switch you off? So there's more control that we've given into the customer space and the users. However, data is also going down, not at the speed that it should be going down at, I suppose, but it is going down. We have reduced now 3 times in 1 year on our data pricing. Now let's go to the question.
We'd like to give Vodacom an award for not blaming ICASA, but okay.
No, we don't blame ICASA at all. So in terms of building networks and building relationships, I think today in the technology world we have a few utensils and softwares that we can use. We're using, for instance, LinkedIn as an... am I advertising somebody else here? As a way of professionally meeting people that you don't know. And if you want to meet certain people, somebody would then say, Jack, can you please connect me to Samantha? I see you are connected to her. And Jack would connect you that way. But there's generally networks that we keep where we're creating a social cohesion by events or by social existence where people would generally meet at the point of. So it's either an event, a soccer event, or a music event, or just a general round table where you call the people that you need to meet and then create that network and register people so that you can continuously meet with them, whether online or physically.
And so let's just delve a little bit further into that, because I think what I'm also trying to get at is some of the more nuanced issues of not just the meeting of the people, but how do you build the relationship when you're meeting with those people?
Wow, okay. Sounds tricky. Okay, so
But be
my
personal.
View,
your
my,
personal.
my view is, I meet Samantha today for the first time, and the first thing I tell her, hey, I've got butterflies in my stomach, It's a way of engaging and starting a discussion. And then from there, we move into the next topic, and the topic of the day, most probably. And then talk about those issues that we're here for. But the first thing is, don't go straight into the topic and say we're here for Fourth Industrial Revolution or we're here for partners. Look, I'm so-and-so and this is who I am, but whoa, this stage is frightening me. And she then says, oh, wow, I'm fine. And she tells me about Jack. I said, I know Jack is eccentric. He's like you, more or less. He will speak the law. But generally, that's how we create the partnership and things that build into a relationship.
I think, and that's fantastic because it reinforces the concept of again, openness, transparency. When you expose a part of yourself at a personal level, it does build rapport immediately. That's a fact. So, on that point, Samantha, you are quite feisty, and you definitely can get out there and etc. How do you deal with difficult situations and still maintain the relationships?
So I'm glad you've asked me that question, because I think we have to break down our conversation even more for the audience, because we've kind of been all over the place a little bit, and just to bring us all back together. Did I say?
You break.
I'm so sorry. I'm a facilitator, I'm a trainer, I'm a teacher. Okay, so for me, when I look at relationships between non-profits, corporates, and SMEs, because that's how non-profits talk, okay? The word transparency infuriates us because we deal with people that cannot be transparent. We deal with people that are being abused, that are being raped, that are being killed. We are the ones that cannot be transparent with our loved ones when we get home. And then we can't even be transparent with our government or our other donor to say, can you please help us pay for operational costs? Because our very donors are saying to us, you are not allowed to be transparent enough to warrant earning a salary because we're not going to pay for operational costs. That to me is the point that I want to bring about, where when you start your relationship and you start looking for, to come back to your example, let's say your life partner, and you start flirting with that person and you start building a relationship and then you go on a couple of dates. When you decide you want to marry that person, how long have you spent researching that person and thinking about that person? I hope a long time. The problem is that non-profits don't have that time because they are desperate to help the people that need the help, number one. Number two, often corporates are desperate to send out those emails 3 days before my financial end saying, Sam, can you please send us your BBEEEE certification? Meanwhile, they don't even know that my name's not Sam, it's Samantha. You know what I'm trying to say? We get emails like that from corporates, and we're like, who are you? Do you even know what we do, and what scorecard are you trying to match here? And then you have government, who I agree absolutely. There are a couple of people that they do make you wait 100 hours in the local office, but they don't take enough time to say to us, you know what, Sam, your nonprofit is important. We are going to walk this journey with you for 12 years before you must expect funding. If we just had that level of transparency, we could plan, right? Thank you.
Expectations.
Expectations, that's it. If you're going to go, it's common sense. If you're going to marry somebody, you kind of know what to expect from them and they know what to expect from you. We are missing that in the sector, and I truly believe it's because we don't know what each other does. I don't know what the constraints are with government because I've never worked in government. I don't know what it's like to work in a corporate office. I've never really worked there. I know what it's like to work in a non-profit. I can tell you all about that. But I have to put myself in the shoes of these two gentlemen before I ask them for money, and vice versa. That's what I would say.
Fantastic. I feel totally berated at this point.
Sorry.
I was like, okay, we've been all over the place today. Right. So listen, I'm coming back. I'm here. I'm with
Staying
you,
on topic.
Jack. Right
Yeah.
now, I'm with you.
On topic, yeah, we're okay with that.
So let's just stay on topic, okay, shall we? So okay, I'm gonna do some wrap up at the moment because I think we've done well. I used the word transparency earlier, but actually I'd missed it. It was actually vulnerability. And I think the word for me when I was trying to find it was being vulnerable, and part of that vulnerability allows for so many of us to then be open with each other. And I think that's what you did. You were vulnerable with Sam, and that immediately created a relationship and a connection. So I'm going to move over to Jack there. Just to summarize, Jack, because you actually gave some really good points about the zone of opportunity, the trying to align the misalignments, and there's quite a few misalignments you had. If you haven't, how would you get people to share their internal workings? Because that's the problem. We walk into a government office, the person's not sitting there going like, I have to work from 8 to 3, and they don't complain about their jobs just so that you know what the internal workings are. How would you get the misalignment of process right in sharing?
So I think one of the things government has got to get much better at is simplifying. So I'll give you an example from the SME inclusion universe. If you want to be a direct contractor and service provider to any sphere of government, we've counted. It's 27 different documents you have to submit. So the vast majority of smaller enterprises can't do that. And a lot of that is put in place around fraud prevention. It's various laws that are designed to manage different risks, right? And government itself has to also be responsible for managing those risks, because it's exactly the absence of that leads to houses not getting built, sewers not getting fixed, school toilets not being installed, et cetera, et cetera. So government, in order to simplify how it can be approached, can do one of two things. Number one, we can make the approach process more digitized, not more fluid, but more accessible, available in more places, explained in simpler terms, and where we let people fill out a single form as a single point of contact. So if you look at one of our big aspirations is Gauteng, which we haven't got to in the 5th administration, and I hope we do really make a centerpiece of the 6th, is this idea of a common platform where the citizen can do exactly that. But the process from where we are to there is still some road left to travel, because you've got to amalgamate all these different processes. And governments throughout the world struggle with this problem all the time. So you can make it simpler to approach you. Certainly with SMMEs, we've done that with a program that we call the SMME Clearinghouse, which we're launching at the moment, which gives a lot of small businesses of various sizes the opportunity to actually enroll in a platform that then opens them up for work with government, work with certain corporates, to be targeted with advertised services by people who want specific kinds of SMMEs. So there's ways that we can simplify and bring people together in digital spaces that are common, but that are relevant to them, so that you're not wasting your time being there. I think the second piece that can really make a big difference is platforms. So I touched on it very lightly in my first point, but we find increasingly that one of the biggest advantages of the digital age is the platform effect. Now, Rudi, he's from a cell phone company is now a technology company. So he had to run the 4th Industrial Revolution script. It's probably in his contract. But from the point of view of government, you mentioned the platform effect is useful to think about this way. Would you climb into a 4-year-old Ford Focus driven by a complete stranger and that says, I'll take you anywhere within 5 kilometers for $50? The answer is no. Most people wouldn't. A little bit of a distinction if you're an Alex and you're riding with the Avanzas because you probably know the person, etc. But let's say in most cases, no. Yet Uber gets a number of very conservative, often middle class, quite uptight people to do that every day. because the platform involves recourse. You know that you've got, it's not just transparency, it's actually something much more vital, which is the ability to go somewhere if something goes wrong. The fact that you've got a feedback loop is a huge thing. And a platform that includes a feedback loop, that includes transparency about history of interactions, etc., makes a big difference. That's the way Airbnb operates. Otherwise, the entire platform would be full of all kinds of horrific people that want to lure the kind of people that respond to those Nigerian 419 scams into their homes to rob them. Yet Airbnb doesn't, because they know that they would be found out and there would be a recourse scenario. So from the point of view of government, one of the things we can increasingly do is look at how platforms can bridge gaps that we find in the people we are dealing with. So if NGOs have huge capacity challenges with audited financials, should we not be investing in platforms that provide that at a lower cost? If SMMEs have huge compliance burdens being direct providers to government, can single providers amalgamate and bundle them so that they can service government as if they were one large creature? And this is being done in various parts of the economy. I can give you numerous examples. But the bottom line for me is simplification and developing platforms that create shared capacity, I think, are two ways that we can build definitely much more productive relationships and also give people more transparency as to where they are in the equation. NGOs again and again will tell me the kind of thing that Sam has said. It's planning horizons. I need to know, can I pay staff for the next 3 months? If I can't, I've got to be honest with them, otherwise I've got to make them work for free, and at the end they hate me. Whereas if you told me that the chances are the funding's only being released in 6 months' time, at least I might not be happy about it, but I've got a planning horizon. So, and it's also about aligning people behind common data, and that's the last point I'll make here. So data is increasingly and validly a big part of what we do. I use geospatial data a lot because in South Africa, place matters. Apartheid wrecked so much about urban and social systems, and part of its biggest intervention was place. It trapped certain people in certain places, and those places still bear the scars. If you can focus attention commonly around the most deprived places, you increase impact. That's the kind of thing platforms can also do. So data that is commonly understandable can also build relationships. Even if I'm not funding an NGO, the fact that I can make information available about where intervention is needed and where we as government understand the need for intervention, and if the NGO can feed information back into the same platform and it can be validated, all of a sudden you're starting to speak a common data language, which is also key to the health of your relationship. I think I'll stop there, having bridged the convergence and technology divides. But yeah, that's where I'd go.
Thank you. Actually, you can clap for that one. Thank you, Jack. Thank you for that.
Okay. I roll officially.
Sam, over to you to pull us all together again.
Yes.
Okay, what can I do?
You can just be you.
Okay, just be me. You know what? I love hearing common data language because we all do it on Facebook, right? The difference, well, not the difference, the challenge that we have now as partners in these cross sectors is how do we best educate people with digital skills that need it the most. And to be honest with you, the non-profits that need it the most are the ones that none of you have ever heard of. So we need to be better at collaboration in terms of how are we going to go and find those non-profits, because we know that if we teach those non-profits the skills, the social impact that they will have is thousands because of their direct communities that none of us have even thought of, because we don't have them on a common data point. And for me, that is what I think for the next year should be a huge focus from every landscape is, even if you can't donate 100 Rand to a non-profit in need, how can you, in your SME or your corporate or your government department, volunteer your skilled staff? For example, can you go back to your office today and say to your line manager, Sam said we need to use our legal team and we need to get our lawyers together and create a webinar or a blog series to teach nonprofits how to read contracts. Because if they could read contracts, they didn't have to pay a lawyer to to do that, they would then understand how to negotiate with Vodacom or with whoever it is. And that is how we're going to increase the cross-sector partnerships, because NGOs, particularly who I'm speaking for, they're going to see more value than just 1,000 Rand coming in, which is going to last them a week. They're going to be given something that they can turn into an income-generating stream, so to say. And it's all education.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And then finally, Rudi, if you can wrap up partnerships.
Okay, let me go all over. I'm joking.
That's going to be our meme.
Yes.
Decentralization.
So, my view is, or maybe let me explain it this way by a quote by Maya Angelou, who says, people will forget what you do, people will forget what you say, but people will never forget how you make them feel. So if that becomes our mantra and our way of setting up partnerships, we will not fail. But two, it's on sustainable development. We need to make sure that we do not leave anybody behind. Whether it's fourth industrial revolution, whether it's 5G, whether it's data, or whether it's big data, we need to make sure that everybody gets onto the bandwagon. The next one is on AI. How do we translate what we do here, put it on the big data or big data lake, and create a situation where people will be able to access that data, whether it's contracting, because then if it's big data and it's AI, artificial intelligence will tell you that, no, this contract is faulty. You'll just submit it on the big data lake, and it will come with a standard contract, which then you use it to negotiate with the big bosses at Vodacom.
They need tablets to do that. Okay, so it's hardware now.
It's hardware.
Yeah.
So
No,
generally speaking, I think that's what we need to do. But for partnerships in general, humility takes you a long way. If you have that humaneness and you humble yourself, irrespective of your position or your status, that would take us a long way in building any relationship. Whether you get funding from Vodacom or not, the fact of the matter is that you now have built a network, and a network is not built for today. I mean, networks that I have as far back as 1994, 1995, when I started working. And sometimes I get calls, like today I got a call from somebody that had ever spoken to me when I was working for another company 10 years ago. And I realized that to keep a network and to keep a person, it's much greater than to keep them for the immediate benefit.
Yeah, I agree.
So,
I
thank
agree.
you.